Good morning, fellow film fans. I recently watched a video on YouTube by someone who was talking about director's cuts which actually made the original theatrical cut worse. I want to do the opposite. I want to talk about director's cuts and or alternate versions of movies which actually made the theatrical release better. I disagree with the author of that video about one or two of the movies, particularly Donnie Darko, the director's cut. I like the theatrical release of Donnie Darko, and I like the fact that it does leave certain things up to the audience to figure out. The director's cut explains some of those things in more detail. You get to see more of Rebecca Sparrow's book, The Theory of Time Travel, which explains certain scenes in the movie. Also, the director, Richard Kelly, changed the music from the opening music from Echo and the Bunnymen's version of Killing Time to a different song, which he actually preferred. And again, I think he's the director. He has the right to do that. I thought it was good, and I enjoyed it just as much as I enjoyed the theatrical cut. The other one I disagree with is about Apocalypse Now Redux, which adds almost, I think, 45 minutes, I think, to the movie. That reviewer thought that those minutes were not necessary and just made the movie drag on. I disagree. I thought it made the movie more interesting. Yeah, it's long, but I don't think that's really a problem. Anyway, the ones that I do like begin with Alex Proyas's 1991 masterpiece, Dark City. I much prefer the director's cut for several reasons. One, it eliminates the rather annoying voiceover at the beginning, which I think explains things a little too much. I think it takes some of the mystery out of the movie, which is the whole point. The whole thing is a mystery. We don't know who John Murdoch is. Where did he come from? What's the city he's in? How did he get there? How come he doesn't fall asleep when everybody else does at midnight? I think it's fun to discover these things with Rufus Sewell's character and Jennifer Connelly and William Hurt and Kiefer Sutherland, and Richard O'Brien and Sir Ralph Richardson, rather than having them explained to us like we're idiots. Also, there's an interesting addition in the scene where Mr. Book has decided that he has to kill Melissa George's character, May, the prostitute. She has a daughter, and her daughter is hiding under the bed while this takes place, and later presents a drawing of the strangers to William Hurt's character, Inspector Bumstead, and he realizes that there's some connection to these drawings and the circles and the circle that's carved into Melissa George's body with the case he was pursuing and was pursued by his predecessor, Detective Walensky, who went mad and killed himself. So that's an interesting addition. The graphics are cleaned up, and some of these scenes are much darker and more menacing. I really prefer the director's cut to the original, and I highly recommend it. Another movie which I like that has some alternate cuts, though they're not really director's cut, is The Big Sleep, which has both the 1945 quote-unquote pre-release version and the 1946 theatrical release. What happened is the film was finished by Howard Hawks in 1944, and the 1945 version was only sent to armed services members overseas. Charles K. Feldman, Lauren Bacall's agent, objected to several scenes in the movie, particularly the scene where Lauren Bacall appears in Philip Marlowe's office wearing a veil. He thought he was a little bit frightened that people would prefer the rather gorgeous Martha Vickers as Carmen Sternwood to Lauren Bacall's character Vivian Rutledge, and also didn't think there was enough dialogue between Philip Marlowe and Vivian Rutledge. Now, in the 1945 version, the relationship between Marlowe and Vivian is a little colder at the beginning. Of course, there was no such relationship between Marlowe and Vivian Regan in the book, but I understand why they played it up, playing off of their chemistry into Have and Have Not, and they wanted to reignite that, so they had them become much more, involved. One of in the scene where Lauren Bacall is quote-unquote hijacked outside of Eddie Mars's nightclub, she says rather sardonically, "What are you, my bodyguard now?" And there's a little less of the kind of sexy banter between them. Marlowe is still suspicious of her, and he realizes that this whole thing's a setup. I thought that was more realistic. Also, in the 45 version, he does more detective work. When he's in Arthur Gwynne Geiger's house, he finds that the window has been jimmied, that there are 2 glasses in the sink which have been washed, obviously to conceal the fact that Carmen was drugged. He finds the lockbox containing Geiger's code book inside Geiger's desk and jimmies it open, which I think is good. He's doing more detective work rather than just having to guess at these things. There's a scene that's cut, which I thought was interesting, but I understand why it was cut. It didn't really add a whole lot to the movie, and it does drag a bit because it's 14 minutes long, where he is summoned to the district attorney's office by his friend Bernie Oles, played by Regis Toomey, and the district attorney kind of gives him a what for interfering in the case. The police captain, Kronjaeger, on it kind of gives him a hard time too. And then it ends up with kind of an affable scene where he's joking with Bernie Oles outside the office. Not really necessary, doesn't add a lot to the film, though I did like it. I particularly liked the lighting by Sidney Hickok, the cinematographer, which is very noir, and it literally shows Marlowe being a round peg in a square hole, as all of the fixtures and things are square inside the district attorney's office, including the wall decorations. The scenes that were another scene that was cut from the 45 version, and this is kind of important, is the one where Marlowe finds Carmen Sternwood waiting for him in his apartment, and she attempts to seduce him, and he throws her out, and she gets angry. That explains the line later in the film when he's talking to Eddie Mars about what happened to Sean Regan. And he says, you've seen Carmen that way. Well, no, in the 45 version, he hadn't seen her that way because that scene was cut. The scene where he takes Carmen Sternwood home is different. In the 46 version, they added the quote-unquote bedroom scene where Bacall is dressed in a very sexy dress and makes a little bit of sexy banter with Marlowe. And then the nightclub, the veil scene was dropped and reshot. The scene in the restaurant where they're talking about horse racing as a metaphor for sexual intercourse was added, and the scene outside the nightclub was made more interesting because she doesn't react negatively in that version. I agree with Feldman about the cuts. There's also a different woman playing Mona Mars, who in the book is really Marlowe's only love interest. He refers to her as quote-unquote Silverwig, but that doesn't take place in the movie, and I understand why. It was a different actress because the original actress was not available for the reshoots. You can also notice a few things. Lauren Bacall's dress is slightly different in the 46 version. The dress that Edith had designed for her had a very distinctive sort of Chinese-style splash on it. It's not the same exactly in the 46 version. It's noticeable, but not very much. So it's not a director's cut, just some different choices. The next one is, interestingly enough, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. There is a much longer director's cut, which has a lot more Civil War scenes. It makes the film a bit more somber and more darker. And there's also a longer scene where they do the chase inside the Sand Hill Cemetery as the helicopter shot is tracing them, running around the graves looking for the grave of Art Stanton, which I thought was good. I recommend watching that version. There's not too much else that's different. I think there's a little bit more dialogue, but not too much. Another thing is the one movie which probably has more cuts than any that I've ever seen is, of course, Blade Runner, Ridley Scott's brilliant 1982 adaptation of Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. There was the original theatrical release, which had the voiceover by Harrison Ford, which he was clearly not happy with, although it was in the script, because he reads the whole thing in a monotone. And I don't really think it added much to the movie. It's explaining things that don't need to be explained. And it also had the tacked-on happy ending where he and Rachel are driving off into the sunset. Literally, scenes cut from Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, unused footage, I should say. Later on, and I think it was 1991, the quote-unquote director's cut came to people's attention. It was shown in Los Angeles. It wasn't a director's cut. It was actually the work print. That prompted, because it got good reviews, that prompted Scott to make a real quote-unquote director's cut, which cut the voiceover and ends abruptly with them getting into the elevator. You don't know what's going to happen to them. Are they going to make it or are they not? Is Deckard a replicant or is he a human? You never get the answers to that in that version either. Then, of course, there were a couple of different cuts. There was the international cut, which included some more violence, more eye gouging. I think Deckard shoots Pris 5 or 6 times rather than 3 in the theatrical release. Roy Batty curses a little bit more, which I actually didn't like. The line, particularly, "I want more life, father," was changed to "I want more life, fucker." Well, that makes Batty a more menacing character, but I don't like that because when he says "I want more life, father," he's more sympathetic. He's a emotionally crippled child looking for help from a distant parent. I like that. That makes him much more sympathetic than if he just curses, for no particular reason. And even in the international cut, if you watch Rutger Hauer's lips, he's actually saying father, not fucker. Another thing that was added, finally we got, there was also the Laserdisc cut, which I think was slightly different. There was the television cut, which cut out all the cursing and toned down the violence. And then there were the Denver and Dallas sneak previews, which we never got to see and never will. We don't know what was cut from those. And finally, in 2007, we got the quote-unquote final cut, which is my preferred version. It incorporates certain scenes from the work print. It, again, eliminates the voiceover. They added a bit of more of the chase scene between Deckard and Zora, reshot it with Joanna Cassidy, and it's just fantastic. They added some better special effects, and they incorporated the then recently found original Unicorn Dream sequence, which is not the one that was in the original. That was something cut from Ridley Scott's Legend. But they found the original Unicorn Dream sequence, which he filmed for this movie specifically, in a warehouse in New Jersey and incorporated it into the final cut. There is also upcoming, I believe this month, a quote-unquote fan edit, and I'm not really too hot on those, but I'm going to discuss one in a minute, called the White Dragon cut, which apparently incorporates some digitally enhanced scenes, including Zora's snake dance, which they just didn't have the budget to film at the time, and Leon hiding on the ceiling in his apartment when Gaff and Deckard investigate and find his photographs and take them. And that's how he knows that they were taken, and he reports that later to Roy Batty. I think that's interesting. I'd like to see that cut, albeit it's not official. Another one where there's an unofficial but very interesting and very good, in my opinion, cut is the Brian Palma's cult classic Phantom of the Paradise. I have a separate video on this, so I'm not going to go into too much depth. But originally, Swan's record company, the company run by Paul Williams' character, or his business rather, was called Swan Song Enterprises. And there were lots of signs and references to Swan Song Enterprises, including on the poster of the Juicy Fruits that Winslow originally pastes up his sign that says Winslow Leach at the piano. And also on the marquee outside of the Majestic says Swan Song, not the Juicy Fruits. It's really makes it a much darker, much more menacing film, and I highly recommend that you watch it. Don't download it, just watch it. It's available on archive.org. I'm not going to go, like I said, into too much more detail, but I think that's a really direct, brilliant, quote-unquote fan edit. But it's not official. A number of other movies, I think, really had good director's cuts. But again, it depends on your taste. I understand that cuts are often made for budgetary reasons. Sometimes they're made for reasons like the ones in Big Sleep, where they really wanted to premiere Lauren Bacall as the star, not Martha Vickers, which isn't a shame in some ways, because apparently one of the scenes that was cut, though I don't know if it was ever shot, but it is in the original script because I've read it, was the one where she actually explains what happened to Sean Regan to Marlowe, and then she tries to kill him, but he's put blanks in her gun, so it doesn't work. I thought that was brilliant, and I'm sorry that it got cut. But again, that was a scene focusing on Carmen Sternwood, not on Vivian Rutledge. So I understand the director's demand that it be cut. I hope that you found these interesting and that you'll watch some of these director's cuts and enjoy them.